I'm Jim Kircher, and this, of course, is a statue of Robert Wadlow, the world's tallest man, born here in Alton 100 years ago in February of 1918. He was so amazingly tall.
The world has seen some incredibly tall people, but no one like Robert Wadlow. He stood 8 feet 11 inches tall, the tallest man ever recorded. For decades, scientists thought they understood why he grew so big. But when artificial intelligence analyzed his DNA, everything changed. What the AI discovered hiding in his genetic code was absolutely terrifying. His body carried mutations and hidden dangers that nobody expected. Could someone like him survive today? What other secrets are buried in his genes? Join us as we uncover the chilling truth about the world's tallest man and what his DNA reveals about the limits of human growth. The mystery of the tallest man. We're talking about someone who makes basketball players look short. Someone who literally has to duck through doorways and can't fit in normal cars. Someone who changed what we thought was even possible for the human body. That person existed. And he wasn't just tall. He was the tallest man who ever lived in recorded history. His name is out there in the record books. His photos are in museums. And people still talk about him today. But here's the thing that nobody really thought about back then. Nobody asked the really important question. Why? Like, what made him grow so tall when everyone else stopped at normal heights? For years, scientists had their theories. Doctors examined him while he was alive and said it was probably a pituitary problem, some kind of condition where his body forgot to stop growing. And sure, that made sense on the surface, but it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain why he was so much taller than other people with the same condition. It didn't explain why his body seemed to be working against him in ways nobody fully understood. See, when he was alive, doctors had some ideas. They said it was probably just his body not knowing when to stop growing. Some kind of medical condition that kept pushing him taller and taller. And yeah, that was part of it, but they didn't have the tools back then to really look deep inside and see what was actually going on. They couldn't see the tiny instructions written in his DNA that made him who he was. They were making guesses based on what they could see on the outside, not what was happening on the inside. Fast forward to today. We've got technology that would seem like actual magic to people from back then. We've got computers that can think. We've got artificial intelligence that can solve puzzles humans couldn't crack in a million years. And someone had a wild idea. What if we used that AI to analyze the DNA of the world's tallest man? What if we could finally see what really made him different? What if we could unlock secrets that had been hiding in his genetic code for almost a century? So they did it. Scientists fed all his genetic information into an AI system and told it to look for anything unusual. Anything that might explain why he grew to such an impossible height. And the AI started working, scanning through millions of genetic markers, comparing his DNA to thousands of other people, looking for clues that human eyes might miss. And then it found something. Actually, it found a lot of things. Things that made the scientists step back from their computers with worried looks on their faces. Things that made them realize this man's story was way more complicated and way more terrifying than anyone had guessed. Because it wasn't just about being tall. His DNA revealed secrets about what his body was going through, risks he was carrying that nobody knew about, and questions about whether someone like him could even survive in our world today. What secrets did his giant body hide? We're about to find out who he really was. The name of the world's tallest man was Robert Wadlow, and if you've never heard of him, you're about to have your mind blown. This wasn't some made-up story or exaggerated tale from ancient times. Robert was a real person who lived in Illinois in the early 1900s, and when they say he was tall, he was actually 8 feet 11 inches tall. To put that in perspective, the average doorway is about 6 feet 8 inches tall. Robert had to duck under every single doorway he ever walked through. Normal beds? Forget it. Regular chairs? No chance. His parents had to custom-build furniture just so he could exist in their house. Can you imagine going through life like that? But here's what makes his story even crazier. Robert wasn't born unusually tall. When he was a baby, he was pretty normal-sized. But then something happened. Around the time he turned 2 years old, his body just started growing and growing and growing. By the time he was 8 years old, he was already taller than his father. By 13, he was the tallest Boy Scout in the world. By the time he was a teenager, he was already breaking records. People came from all over just to see him, to touch him, to prove to themselves he was real. They treated him like a circus attraction, like something less than human. But nobody stopped to think about what it was doing to him, what was happening inside his body while the world just stared. Robert tried to live a normal life, though. He really did. He went to college. He wanted to study law. He had friends and family who loved him. But everywhere he went, people stopped and stared. They whispered. They pointed. Some were amazed. Some were scared. Little kids would hide behind their parents. Adults would ask to take photos with him like he was some kind of tourist attraction. And his body kept growing. Even as a young adult, he never stopped. Most people stop growing in their late teens. Robert just kept going. Doctors back then said it was because of a problem with his pituitary gland. That's the little part of your brain that controls growth hormones. His just wouldn't turn off. It kept pumping out growth hormones like a broken faucet that nobody could shut off. But that's what doctors thought back then with the limited tools they had. They saw the obvious stuff: the height, the giant hands and feet, the way his body struggled to support his own weight. What they didn't see, what they couldn't see, were the hidden dangers lurking in his genetic code. Robert died when he was only 22 years old. 22. Most people are just starting their lives at that age, but his body couldn't keep up with what his genes were forcing it to do. Scientists have always asked, why was he so different? Was it just gigantism or something no one expected? And the truth was inside his genes, and it was even stranger than the myths. Why his DNA is important. The thing that kept scientists up at night for decades was the fact that Robert Wadlow wasn't the only tall person who ever lived. There have been other people throughout history who grew really tall. But Robert was different. He was in a category all by himself. And the big question was always, why? What made his body do something that no other human body had ever done before or since? When Robert was alive, doctors did their best to figure it out. They examined him. They took measurements. They ran whatever tests they had available back in the 1930s and 40s, and they came up with an answer that seemed to make sense. They said he had something called gigantism. Basically, his pituitary gland was producing way too much growth hormone, and it just never stopped. Okay, cool. That explains the height, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Lots of people have had gigantism throughout history. Some of them grew to 7 feet tall, maybe 7.5 feet. But 8 feet 11 inches? That's not just gigantism. That's something else entirely. That's like gigantism on steroids. So scientists started wondering if there was more to the story. They also knew about another condition called acromegaly. That's when your body keeps producing growth hormone even after you're done growing. So instead of getting taller, your bones get thicker. Your hands get huge. Your jaw sticks out. Your organs start growing bigger. And yeah, Robert had signs of that too. His hands were massive. His feet were enormous. He wore size 37 shoes. 37? Most shoe stores don't even go past size 15, but even knowing about gigantism and acromegaly didn't answer the real question. Why him? Why did his body react this way when other people with similar conditions didn't grow nearly as tall? There had to be something in his genetic code, some instruction written into his DNA that made him unique. And that's why his DNA is so incredibly important. See, DNA is like the instruction manual for building a human being. It tells your cells how to grow, when to stop growing, what color your eyes should be, how tall you should get. Everything about you is written in that code. And somewhere in Robert's code, there was a glitch, or maybe multiple glitches, something that told his body to just keep going when everyone else's body knew to stop. Scientists today have tools that the doctors back in Robert's time could only dream about. We can read DNA like a book now. We can see every single letter in the genetic code. We can compare one person's DNA to millions of other people and spot the differences. We can find mutations that are so tiny, so hidden, that no human eye could ever catch them. And that's exactly what they needed to do with Robert's DNA. They needed to find those hidden mutations, those secret instructions that made him grow into a giant. Because understanding his DNA doesn't just tell us about Robert. It tells us about how human growth works. It tells us what can go wrong. And it might even tell us what could happen to other people in the future. But to find those answers, they needed something more powerful than any human scientist. They needed a machine that could see patterns invisible to us. They needed AI. How? I cracked the code. No human could ever spot the secrets hidden in his DNA, but AI could, and that was why AI was the perfect tool for this job. Human DNA is insanely complicated, like mind-blowingly complicated. We're talking about 3 billion base pairs, 3 billion tiny letters that spell out everything about who you are. If you tried to read your own DNA out loud, 1 letter per second, it would take you almost 100 years. 100 years just to read it once, not even to understand it. Now imagine you're a scientist trying to find a genetic mutation in all of that. You're looking for maybe one tiny change, one single letter that's different from what it should be. That's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on an entire beach. Actually, it's worse than that. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on every beach in the world. The human brain just isn't built for that kind of task. But artificial intelligence can scan through millions of genetic markers in seconds. It can compare Robert's DNA to thousands of other people who had growth disorders. It can spot patterns that would take a human scientist decades to notice. And it doesn't get tired. It doesn't get bored. It doesn't miss things because it had too much coffee or not enough sleep. Here's how it works. Scientists took whatever genetic information they had from Robert. Some of it came from preserved tissue samples. Some came from medical records. Some came from his family members, because you inherit DNA from your parents, so their DNA can tell you things about his DNA too. They fed all of this information into an AI system that was specifically designed to analyze genomes. The AI started by building a complete picture of Robert's genetic code. It filled in gaps where information was missing. It cross-referenced everything with massive databases of human DNA from all over the world. Then, it started looking for anomalies. Weird stuff, things that didn't match up with normal human DNA. But it didn't just look for obvious mutations. That's the thing that makes AI so powerful. It can find connections that humans would never think to look for. Maybe there's a mutation in one gene that seems harmless by itself, but when it's combined with a mutation in another gene, it creates a massive problem. A human scientist might look at those 2 mutations separately and think they're no big deal, but AI can see how they work together. The AI also compared Robert's DNA to people with similar conditions, people with gigantism, people with acromegaly, people with pituitary tumors. It looked at what they all had in common and what made Robert different. It built models to predict how each genetic variation might have affected his growth, his health, his lifespan. And then it started finding things. Not just one thing, multiple things. Mutations that nobody expected. Genetic variations that had never been seen before. Hidden risks that were lurking in his code the entire time he was alive. The discoveries it made were so shocking that scientists had to double-check the results. Because what AI found wasn't just about height. It was about something far more dangerous, something that could have killed him at any moment. What AI found was more than anyone imagined: mutations, hidden risks, and traits that could have ended his life early. The terrifying findings. The AI didn't just find one simple answer. It found a whole web of genetic problems that were all working together to make Robert's body do impossible things. And some of these discoveries were genuinely terrifying when you think about what they meant for his everyday life. First, the obvious one. The AI confirmed what doctors back then had suspected. Robert had a mutation affecting his pituitary gland. This tiny gland at the base of your brain is supposed to release growth hormone in careful, controlled amounts. Robert's gland had a tumor on it, and that tumor was caused by a genetic mutation. So his body was just dumping growth hormone into his system non-stop. Imagine a car with the gas pedal stuck to the floor. That was Robert's growth system. But here's where it gets scarier. The AI found that this wasn't just making him tall. It was putting massive stress on every single system in his body. His heart had to work way harder than a normal heart because it had to pump blood through a body that was almost 9 feet tall. Think about that. Your heart is designed for a body that's maybe 5.5 to 6 feet tall. Robert's heart was trying to supply blood to a body that was 50% bigger than that. It was working overtime every single second of every single day. The AI also discovered mutations that affected his bone structure. See, bones aren't just solid sticks. They're living tissue that constantly rebuilds itself. Robert's bones were growing so fast that they couldn't keep up with making themselves strong enough. The AI found genetic markers that showed his bones were weaker than they should have been for someone his size. He was basically walking around on a skeleton that wasn't built to support his own weight. And it gets worse. The analysis revealed that Robert had genetic predispositions to infections. His immune system wasn't working at full strength. Combined with the fact that his skin was constantly stretching to cover his growing body, this made him incredibly vulnerable. Any small cut or scrape could turn into a serious infection, and that's actually what killed him in the end. A simple blister on his ankle from a leg brace got infected, and his body just couldn't fight it off. But the AI found something else too, something that made scientists really uncomfortable. Robert's DNA showed signs that his body was aging faster than it should. His cells were wearing out quicker than normal. It's like his body was living in fast-forward mode. Everything was happening too quickly, growing too fast, working too hard, breaking down too soon. The AI calculated that even if Robert hadn't died from that infection at 22, he probably wouldn't have lived past 30. His heart would have given out, or his bones would have started breaking under his own weight, or his organs would have just stopped working from the strain. These findings weren't just about one man's tragedy. They opened up questions that scientists are still trying to answer today. Because if Robert's DNA could do this, what does it mean for the future of human genetics? Could anyone survive this today? What this means for science. This wasn't just about one man. It could change everything we know about human growth. There's why Robert's DNA analysis is such a huge deal for science. It's not just about understanding one person who lived almost 100 years ago. It's about understanding the absolute limits of what a human body can do. And more importantly, it's about understanding what happens when those limits get pushed too far. Before the AI analysis, scientists had theories about gigantism and extreme growth disorders. They knew the basics. Pituitary gland problems, too much growth hormone, bones that keep growing. But they didn't really understand all the domino effects. They didn't see the complete picture of how one genetic mutation could trigger a cascade of problems throughout the entire body. Now, they do. The AI findings showed scientists exactly how interconnected everything is. It's not just about height. When you mess with growth hormones, you're messing with your heart, your bones, your immune system, your metabolism, your organs, everything. It's like pulling one thread in a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Robert's DNA was the perfect example of this unraveling in real time. This has massive implications for treating growth disorders today. Doctors now have a much better roadmap. They can see the warning signs earlier. If a kid is diagnosed with a pituitary tumor that's causing excessive growth, doctors don't just focus on stopping the growth anymore. They monitor the heart. They check bone density. They watch for immune system problems. They try to catch all those secondary issues before they become life-threatening. But it goes even deeper than that. Scientists are now looking at whether some of these genetic mutations might exist in smaller forms in regular people. Maybe you don't have the exact mutations Robert had, but maybe you have similar ones that affect you in different ways. Could some people's chronic health issues be linked to minor variations of the same genetic problems Robert had? The AI analysis opened up entire new research pathways. And then there's the really big question, the one that makes some people excited and other people nervous. Are we ready for humans like this in the future? Because here's the thing. We're getting really good at genetic engineering. Scientists can now edit genes. They can potentially fix mutations before a baby is even born. So what happens if we encounter these mutations in the future? Do we fix them? Should we fix them? Some people say, absolutely yes. Why would you let a child suffer through what Robert went through if you could prevent it? But other people ask harder questions. Where do we draw the line? Do we only fix mutations that cause serious health problems? Or do we start deciding what counts as too tall, too short, too different? Who gets to make those decisions? Robert's case also raises questions about human evolution. Is extreme height something that would naturally get selected out over time because it causes so many problems? Or could there be future scenarios where being extremely tall might actually be an advantage? What if we colonize other planets with different gravity? Would Robert's genetics suddenly become useful instead of deadly? But while scientists debate the future, we can't forget the past. Behind all these genetic discoveries and scientific breakthroughs was a real person, a young man who just wanted to live a normal life, and his story is heartbreaking. The human side of the giant. Being the tallest man in history came with a price, and this was beyond just the science and DNA discussion. Because it's easy to get lost in mutations and genetic codes and forget that Robert Wadlow was an actual person with feelings, dreams, and struggles. And his life was really hard in ways most of us could never imagine. Think about your average day. You wake up in a bed that fits you. You walk through doorways without thinking about it. You sit in chairs that were made for someone your size. You wear clothes that you can buy at any store. You ride in cars without having to fold yourself into weird positions. You go to restaurants and sit at tables without your knees hitting the underside. All of this is automatic for you. Robert couldn't do any of that. Every single thing in the world was too small for him. His family had to build custom furniture. His bed was specially made. His chairs were reinforced. His clothes had to be handmade because no store sold anything in his size. When he traveled, which he did a lot because people wanted to see him, he couldn't stay in normal hotel rooms. The beds were too short, the ceilings were too low. And the pain. Oh man, the pain. Robert needed leg braces to walk because his legs couldn't fully support his weight on their own. Those braces rubbed against his skin constantly. They caused blisters and sores. Remember, his skin was already stretched thin from his rapid growth, so it was extra sensitive. Every step he took probably hurt, but he kept walking. He kept going out in public. He kept smiling for photos even though he was probably in constant discomfort. Socially, it was brutal too. Everywhere he went, people stared. And not in a polite way. They gawked. They pointed. They treated him like a circus freak instead of a human being. Little kids would be scared of him. Adults would ask invasive questions. Strangers would touch him without permission just to see if he was real. Can you imagine living like that? Never being able to just blend in. Never having a moment where you're just another person in the crowd. Robert wanted to be a lawyer. He went to college and studied, but his health kept getting worse. His body was breaking down under its own weight. Simple infections that would be no big deal for you or me became serious threats to him. And eventually, a blister from his leg brace got infected. The infection spread, and at 22 years old, surrounded by family who loved him, Robert Wadlow died. He never got to become a lawyer. He never got married. He never got to live a full life. His body is gone, but his DNA remains. And even now, with everything AI has discovered, there are still mysteries locked in his genetic code. Questions that might never be fully answered. The last mystery. Even with AI, questions remain about the end of Robert Wadlow's story, because in a lot of ways, his story isn't really over. Because even with all the incredible technology we have today, even with AI that can analyze millions of genetic markers in seconds, There are still things we don't fully understand about what made Robert who he was. The AI found mutations. It found genetic variations. It mapped out how his body was working overtime and breaking down. But here's what it couldn't tell us. Why did those specific mutations happen to him? Was it just random chance? Was there something in his family history that made it more likely? Could it happen again to someone else? Scientists are still studying these questions. They're looking at his relatives' DNA. They're comparing his genetic profile to thousands of other people with growth disorders. They're trying to figure out if there's a way to predict when these extreme mutations might occur. Because if we can predict them, maybe we can prevent them, or at least prepare for them better than doctors could back in Robert's time. But there's a bigger mystery too, one that keeps scientists up at night. Could someone like Robert exist today? And if they did, would modern medicine be able to help them live a longer, healthier life? We have better treatments now. We can remove pituitary tumors. We can control growth hormones with medication. We can monitor heart health and bone density. We can fight infections with powerful antibiotics. But would it be enough? The AI analysis showed that Robert's problems were so interconnected, so complex, that fixing one issue wouldn't fix them all. It was like trying to patch holes in a dam while water keeps pouring through. Modern medicine might buy someone like Robert more time, but could it actually give them a normal lifespan? Nobody really knows. And then there's the wildest question of all. Are humans evolving in ways we can't even imagine? Robert's mutations were extreme, but what about smaller variations? What if there are people alive right now with genetic codes that are quietly pushing the boundaries of what humans can be? Taller, stronger, smarter, more resistant to disease? The AI that analyzed Robert's DNA could potentially find these people too. It could spot patterns in the general population that might hint at where humanity is heading next. Some scientists think we're on the verge of a new era of human genetics, one where we don't just study mutations after they happen, but where we can see them coming, where we can make choices about which genes to keep and which to change. Robert's DNA is like a warning label for what can go wrong, but it's also a map for understanding what's possible. Robert Wadlow's DNA continues to unlock mysteries about human growth, genetic limits, and what makes us who we are. The AI discoveries were just the beginning. As technology advances, who knows what other secrets will emerge from his genetic code? One thing is certain: the tallest man in history left behind a legacy far more complex and terrifying than anyone ever imagined. His genes still have stories to tell. Could someone like him exist today? Or are humans evolving in ways we can't even imagine? The giant may be gone, but his DNA still holds terrifying answers. And maybe, just maybe, some of those answers are still waiting to be discovered. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.